much. Okay, I think that the floor. How about from the audience?
This is for both Carrie and Corna, and I want to ask you your relationship with passing and what that means for you currently and what it means for you in the past. Because both of you obviously are in very comfortable clothes, you know. But do you, when you're not really putting in even more effort, you know, we all have those days, do you ever get mistaken for as a guy, and does that ever, you know, does that bring back gender dysphoria, or how do you feel with that now? Or do you ever get called, you know, sir, you know, or he, you know, someone says in passing he, and what that means for you, what that meant for you back then in terms of passing and what it means for you now?
That's a great question. So I really wanted to pass. That was what my transition was about. I wanted to walk down the street being perceived as a guy. And then I got like terrible, terrible transition advice. In 2012, I went to the Philly Trans Health Conference. I got awful transition advice. And I specifically got the advice that it was like transphobic of me to care about passing. And that, you know, that I should just like socially transition right away and like get on hormones right away. Okay, well, if you have my body, you can, testosterone does not in any way make me look male. So testosterone, because I was just like, it was just like, as I took it, it was just more and more clear that I was in no way getting closer to being perceived as a dude. Like my dysphoria was off the charts, off the charts. No, I never, no, like people just don't, I don't think that people look at me and guess that this is in my history. People seem surprised when I disclose it. The stuff that like increases my dysphoria now, mine is very, very body dysmorphic. So like when things are out of my control and I'm feeling humiliated, or especially if the humiliation is sexist, which it often is, it's not so, I just feel like total despair. And my sign that things are going off the charts in my life is that I'll be on medical vacation websites. That means I'm in a terrible place. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the fact is that like life is not fair in terms of who can pass. And what I found is that the community was like really in denial about how different it is for different people to be on the project of trying to pass, and how much money had to do with it, and how much skinniness had to do with it. So, so yeah, in some ways, honestly, if people like this is a little problematic, but like if someone has a more successful transition in terms of like not going homeless and keeping their job and stuff because of hearing my story, I just don't want people to be homeless, and I don't want them to kill themselves. So that feels to me like a positive thing.
As for me, passing used to be a lot more important to me now, or than it is now. And that's because it was really important for me that other people viewed me the right way. I don't know if it's because of my exposure to ideas from radical feminism, or if it's because I'm getting old and just am losing the ability to care as much. But I don't have a right to tell other people what to think about me or how to perceive me. So a lot of people I interact with, I assume believe I'm female or don't give me reason to believe otherwise. I don't correct them. If somebody, the other day, somebody called me sir, and I was like, oh no, my gender identity. It hurts. If you have, there's like a core of your identity. And the weaker it is, the more you need external validation. And the stronger it is, the more you can find some validation inside yourself. never hear trans people talk about that. And it's really important. You have to be able to validate yourself. And you can't do it by getting completely wrapped up in the trans community. You have to actually go into the world and do something, a hobby or a career, and make a change of some sort to get that internal validation. You have to like participate in life.
Thank you.
Yes, over here.
This question is for Carrie. You had mentioned that it's possible to get hormone treatments or prescriptions or whatever from Planned Parenthood on a second visit. Considering that this panel is about gender and material reality, I'm wondering where the financial resources are coming from in order to pay for those hormones and stuff. Like, is it being taken away from women who would otherwise receive services from Planned Parenthood?
Wow, I have no idea. I guess I don't know anything about Planned Parenthood funding. I'm bad at that. So I guess that's a great question. Maybe someone else could speak to that better than me. Maybe.
Well, Planned Parenthood only has a certain amount of money, so you can do the math.
Yeah, and people that donate to Planned Parenthood, many of them have no idea this is happening.
In the back.
This is a question for Nina. This term, compelled speech, it's the first time I've heard that. Could you elaborate on that more?
Yeah. So normally when we talk about freedom of speech, we're talking about not being censored, right? We want to say something and we don't want that shut down. Compelled speech is forcing us to say something that we don't want to say, that we don't want to believe. I mean, off the top of my head, when I was a kid here, the schools started requiring us to say the Pledge of Allegiance, right? You couldn't sit that one out. That's compelled speech. If I am forced to refer to somebody that I know is male as female, if I'm forced to say she, that's compelled speech. As opposed to, being told not to say anything at all, as opposed to censorship.
I guess I think that speech is constantly compelled. The act of speaking is the act of delivering oneself over willingly to compulsion. That one has to say things that mean things for everybody. One has to say, how was your day? The stupidest expression in the world. All of that is participating in compulsion. Now, you're weird enough, and I'm weird enough, and I think we understand each other a little bit. But there's something that really, you're really furious about this compelled speech thing. I guess I figure if somebody wants me to call them an elephant, I'll call them an elephant. I'll say, hey, that trunk is magnificent. I'm going on.
Okay. Okay. So I think we're talking specifically about pronouns, and it's like, why is like this thing a trouble to me?
Yes.
It is because when people are forced to deny the reality in front of their own eyes, that paves the way to fascism. And all of these fascist and all of these fascist and totalitarian projects that we know about, and we go like, how could people do that? How could they do that? It's like, because they were homing to the herd. Their main concern was their neighbors and what other people were going to say about them, rather than each person thinking to the best of their ability for themselves, right? I realize that, the self-other, it's a continual negotiation between self and other, but there are times when I myself perceive reality, and I know it's fucking reality, right? Like, I trust my senses over what other people are compelling me to say. And then when they up the ante by, for example, no platforming my film, calling me a TERF, calling me hateful, shutting me out of the community, things like that, then it's like, rather than going like, okay, I guess I was wrong, I'm like, nope. It's like, I know what I am seeing. I know my perceptions. I'm not saying my perceptions are infallible. They're not. But everybody is entitled to their own perceptions, right? Other people do not get to dictate your perceptions and your thoughts. And that means you can be wrong. You're going to hurt people's feelings. People might feel bad, right? But you take self-responsibility and you honor your experience above what other people tell you your experience needs to be.
Thank you.
You just said something, Nina, about being called hateful. I guess I want to ask everybody about this. It's about hate, really, which is that I know I feel like the call for empathy is largely always out there, and I feel like, for me, that my positions are empathetic, and I imagine that everyone in this room feels that they have empathy. And when I feel like people lose friends when it comes to this topic, people lose you know, the respect or care of people that they care about, or they fear that they're going to lose that. So how can we walk forward into, you know, this world that we're in and address those who might call people hateful, when it seems to me that no one here is hateful? And that's for everybody.
So do you have a reply to that?
Creative panel discussion?
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
I mean,
How do you
go-
bridge,
you go first.
bridge the divide?
You can't make somebody listen. So I don't know that there's much else to say. If you're ready to listen.
I'm sorry, you can't make people listen, but what if you're being shut out of your community and by, you know, a cafe and by your friends and family, it really impacts you in a material way. What if your employment is being targeted?
Well,
you know,
it's actually, it's unfair, and it's lonely, and it sucks. And what you do is you say, hey, Nina, we should do something in Urbana. And get some people who want to hear these ideas. Because no, I don't think anybody in this room has hate for anybody. But when you feel like if you open your mouth, people are going to exile you, you don't say anything. So you start speaking.
yeah, what he said.
So you have something to add, Carrie?
I think a lot about normies, and I think a lot about squares and like people who don't know, they don't know the context at all, and like how often when I talk to people about like informed consent care and statistics and stuff, they're just like, they had no idea any of this was happening. And so I guess I feel like, I've been called hateful like a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess I feel like the person calling me hateful is not actually like my audience. Like it's actually normies that I'm directed to. So I feel like the person calling me hateful, like they're working through shit, whatever. Like it's gonna, it's like, okay, you feel that way now. Things change. Things changed for me. I don't know. So that's kind of how I feel about it. I feel like the people outside the context matter more. I don't know.
Right, but if they're your employer and they're calling you hateful and they fire you from your job,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, although, yeah, that's true. I mean, you know what? Another thing is that when I left the community, I was like, I'm only going to be in normie contexts. I'm only going to have bosses and, like, I don't hang out in, like, alternative spaces. I don't hang out with anyone who has, like a side mullet, or like I don't hang out with vegans anymore. Like I am normie, and that
Hang out with me.
but like specifically, and I don't mean to make light of your concern because people do get fired. Because people lose money, people lose housing situations. Yes, for some people there actually is not the option to seek out safety. But so I don't know the answer. I'm just like, that has been my personal strategy, and so I'm very focused on people outside the context.
In the back there.
Hi, I read the article, but I unfortunately can't
hear you.
I read the article in the Atlantic, and I think what you did was really important. And I guess I'm thinking about bridges and shared experience. I mean, you went through this journey of being true to yourself. And it seems like the people who are trans are trying to be true to themselves. I mean, everyone is. so why is everybody's panties in a knot about this? That it didn't work for you, and well, that's okay. And it worked for someone else. I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get why they're calling you hateful. You were just being true to yourself.
Yeah, then I was public about it. I mean, I don't know. It's people, it's very distressed people trying to resolve distress. So I think I don't know. I'm sorry, guys. This is a thing I can't figure out. I've been at it for a long time. I don't really know ethically what it. I think a lot about maybe I am being hateful. I think a lot about like it. I self-reflect a lot about whether I'm an okay person. So.
Yeah, that's.
I guess what I'm seeing is like each person is trying to find what home is for them, and you're doing it in your way, and then other people will find it in another place. Why can't we accept that it'll be different for all of us?
Yeah. I would like to address that.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'll get to you
So
next.
it is true that there are very, very well-meaning people that are participating in these witch hunts and not, they know not what they do. They're really, with the best intentions, they're saying Nina Paley is a hateful bigot. But it's not just that. It's not, oh, what's happening. There's political forces at work. And there's a grab for political power, and there are groups of people they form tribes and mobs, and having people to hate is a way that they bond with each other and consolidate their own power. So we actually provide a kind of service to groups that are seeking power. And I don't know what to do about that, but I don't. It's what's going on is not completely benign. I mean, among all individuals, it certainly seems that way. But we're in kind of a sick society. We have been for a long time. Introduced to this society is the internet, and not just the internet, but social media, which is a drug that we've never been exposed to before. And I really think that the rise of genderism, along with some other movements, like it just would not happen without the internet. There's like social dysfunction on steroids. On some kind of drug that we've never encountered before, and we can't stop it, and we can't step back and look at it. We don't really know what's happening. It's as though somebody has like sprayed psycho drugs on everybody in certainly the United States. And we're just going to see what's happening and what's going to happen. And this is what's happening. And I think it's unprecedented, actually. I think that just as totalitarianism was unprecedented in the early 20th century, this is unprecedented as well. And, which gives me a chance to recommend a book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, which is, it has a lot of words in it, but maybe too many words, but excellent concepts.
Over here.
Thank you. This has been so refreshing for me and affirming in many ways, because I've silenced myself tremendously on these topics in academia, actually. So that it's been frightening for me, given that my job is to engage in critical thinking and guide younger people to do the same. But the whole compelled speech issue is tremendously alive. Whole questions of, are you dead naming, or are you doing all these things? I worry tremendously about pediatric transition.
Yes.
Because these are dangerous drugs that, for example, they've been tested on women with endometriosis, with horrifying effects. And these drugs, these so-called puberty blockers, are given to block a development that is mental, physical, emotional, hormonal, all those things. So what happens when you stop something at a stage where you're supposed to be eating better, eating more vegetables, exercising, getting fresh air so you can grow? Okay, so I think this is frightening. Then, the bizarre language tricks that are played on people have me confused, and I read a lot. So people who don't have a depth of hundreds of books that they have read, I suppose they must be even more confused than I am. What I like to say is that 17 to 21-year-olds, as somebody said, they're a very vulnerable population. Yes. There are a lot of people trying to change their names, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But because people are searching, all those things. But I also think that the mutilating of the body
Yes.
is a horrendous problem. So if we think that I would say no mutilation is, I call it mutilation, because I don't think that there's a need to take your breast and chop them off. I don't think that that's like a necessary thing that will make you be less oppressed. Okay, so if we're looking at a situation where as a class of people, women have had to deal with less pay, less leisure time, less access to stuff, and then we think, oh, all we have to do now is chop off our breasts and grow a beard, and then we'll be free. Okay, I think that's tremendously misguided.
Yeah.
Yes, I've ignored this side of the room, so I'm going to focus over here for a while. So
I have just two things to mention. The first was in response to what do we do when someone calls us a hater. And I think one response that someone can do in that case is to ask them to define their terms. What exactly are you accusing me of in detail? How is it that I'm being hateful, and exactly what is the negative impact that I'm delivering? And often people, they don't want to do that. They want to have, well, you're a hater, you're a bigot, be a close to the conversation, rather than having it be a conversation starter where perhaps we can figure out a way that we can coexist together. The second thing that I wanted to bring up, someone mentioned language games. And the language games, people say, well, it's just language. Why does it matter? Well, I think it matters because we've got this thing going on that's kind of like, I tend to call it the euphemism treadmill in reverse. Okay? So you have people saying, well, I'm a woman, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is, it's not just people saying, well, I'm a woman, it's saying that there can only be one way to be a woman, and that one way to be a woman has to somehow encompass the both of us so that there can't be any line driven between. So then, some women will say, well, we're oppressed. We have things that go on with us materially. From the moment that we're born, it's our body that is being judged. Women were not denied the right to vote because of identity issues. Nobody asks the identity of girls. They're told that they got to go in a menstrual hut once a month. Okay? So when we start going on, people say, all right, that's fine. If people want to be into the group of women, then maybe we will start saying that we are female. But what happens? Once people start saying, and this is the norm, right? This is women, this is lesbians on dating sites or whatever, start saying, okay, that's cool. I'm just going to say I'm a female woman or I'm a woman-born woman. But it's a problem because you drew the line. So now that people come up with a way to say that, well, we also are female women. So they will say, I took hormones, therefore I have a female hormonal profile, therefore I'm also a female woman. Or I was born with, I am identifying as a woman, I was born with my genitalia, so my genitalia is women's genitalia, which is female genitalia, so I too am born with female genitalia. So what about that? So people say, okay.
The female penis.
The female penis, yes.
We're cis. All right, so people on dating sites start saying, well, I'm cis. Well, now we got people saying, well, I already went through as much transition as I want, which sometimes includes, you know, the full thing, or not, which is fine. I can understand why people wouldn't. Also, it depends, you know, freedom. But saying that, therefore, they should say that my gender identity no longer mismatched my body because I got body modification, so then maybe I also should be cis. So it's this thing that keeps on going because it's the important part is that there not be any line drawn. Whereas I think, you know, maybe we need to say that trans women are trans women and trans men are trans men, and that's great. And I think that there should be, absolutely should be, protection in the law orthogonal to each other for both sex, for sexual orientation, which is about the body, it's about sex, you know, and also gender presentation and gender identity. There should be room for all of those things, and we should have legal protections for all of them. And it doesn't help anybody when we have people mixing them together, often out of well-meaningness, to say that
they are different.
that we're going to have gender and sex be the same thing. I mean, part of it started out with gender being a euphemism for sex, so that when they ask you sex on the form, you don't do the 12-year-old boy thing and go, oh, yes, right? For sex. But the problem is then, when during that time, we wrote a ton of laws saying that we have gender protection.
Yes.
Right? And when we did that, we meant sex. But now people are saying, well, we got this gender identity thing, so we should rewrite that. And that's where we get this conflict between gender identity and sex. We need to have protections for both of them. Nobody should be getting fired because they're not wearing the right thing.
Right.
You know? We shouldn't have any of this, oh, women gotta wear high heels to work or any of that business either. If some born male person wants to wear the heels to work, power on, right?
Right.
So
They're uncomfortable.
this is where we're at, and so I think it just needs to be, we need protections for all of those. And one of the things that's causing a lot of strife in the community right now is that because of this mixture of gender and sex being defined the same thing, and in fact, you know, even in the Trump pronouncements, he does that too. But a lot of well-meaning people use the terms interchangeably, and so it provides this wiggle room that muddies up the water. But some people needed to use that area to get protections for sexual orientation back in like the 70s and 80s. And it's 100% understandable why they did that, because it was the only way to do it. But now, hopefully we're in a more enlightened time in 2019, and we should be able to say that we want to disambiguate these things. We want to define them separately and have explicit protection for sexual orientation in the law. And I think if we can fight for that, if everybody can get together to fight for that, it'll cause a lot of the strife, maybe, to dissipate somewhat. So I've probably gone way too long.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that was great. I do want to go back to pediatric transition, because actually the more that you know about pediatric transition, the more horrifying it becomes. And I specifically, I'm on this kick where I would like people who are anti-pediatric transition to frame themselves as pro-orgasm, because a lot of times what we're experimenting with is a kid's ability to orgasm.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and and specifically when we talk about male kids, so like Jazz Jennings was on puberty blockers, which will halt your development in terms of having an orgasm, right? And then he had bottom surgery as a young person. So there's
defining terms. What's an orgasm?
That's out of my pay grade. That's not. So like when we talk about like. You know, it's just like, even if a child actually remains trans-identified through their life, when we talk about regret, we also could be talking about, does a 10-year-old know what it is to consent to not being able to orgasm?
No.
Right, yeah, that's, yeah. Okay, that's,
Or fertility.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Not to have too much TMI here, but I did my transition as a teenager, and you're absolutely correct.
Wow. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I have an iPhone.
Can we
Go back to you, sir.
Yeah, and so I wanted to ask a question to Carrie and Corina. This is a thought experiment. Suppose that we lived in a society where people just accepted the physical body that you had and that other people had, and that there was, you know, male and female and a continuum, you know, mixture there, and physically, hormonally, psychologically, whatever, that there was, that people just accepted who we are and didn't try to shove people into categories and say, you know, except for physical, there's male and female. if there was just acceptance, and do you think that people would still feel uncomfortable in their bodies and want to change their bodies if they were accepted in their feelings, and that their feelings about themselves and their identity were just considered totally normal, whatever it was?
Do you want to take that?
Well,
I know it's a hard-
I wish that that would be possible. It seems utopian. The process of puberty and the fact that you're not really mentally mature at the time that you're going through puberty means that even in the most accepting sort of environment, you're going to feel weird about yourself, and it's going to become a puzzle that you try to solve. I think even in that sort of environment that you're supposing if it could exist, I think that there would still be people who would, if they knew that transition was possible, would want to explore it to see if that was a way to find themselves.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of these things are above my pay grade. I don't know. But I know that lots of kids have dissociative symptoms during puberty. Also, it seems like a lot of women, when they're pregnant, have dissociative symptoms. So it seems like when your body is changing very quickly, it's hard to be aware of your body's boundaries and stuff. I do think that if we lived in a wonderful world where everyone was always offered dignity, that would, we would all be mentally more healthy, but
We'd get close. Here, Tracy.
Yeah,
You have a
thanks,
beautiful
Tracy.
name.
So, speaking about compelled speech, it's not just socially compelled anymore. It is being codified into law in some places and countries that if you misgender someone, it will be a misdemeanor. It will be yeah, exactly. In Canada, for instance, the laws about recognizing gender versus sex have now defunded a women's rape relief center.
Yes.
And those are the real effects of why these politics aren't just personal. They affect services for people who need them, and it's very frustrating to watch it happen. And I have a 13-year-old daughter who thankfully is very awake and comfortable and knows, but all of her friends are compelling her speech. All of her friends are saying, you must be non-binary, constantly to her, because she doesn't want to paint her nails and wear a dress. All of her teachers are asking her, are you trans? Because she doesn't like the arts. You know, it's utterly ridiculous. And then as a parent, I also am running into these stories where children are being removed from their parents because the parents are concerned about the health effects of these drugs. And they're saying, you know what, my 13-year-old doesn't have the mental capacity to understand the damage they're doing to their body. I, as the adult, should be able to apply this, but kids are then being taken away from their parents. Like, I know that happened in Ohio. Like there was one in...
yeah, there was a case at least about it.
Yeah,
in
but
Texas it happened.
It is happening, and it's terrifying that kids can transition at school and not have the parents told. And this is not college, this is high school and junior high.
Where they're minors.
Yeah.
The camera woman.
Oh, thank you. I was just hoping that I would like the panelists to talk about the underlying sexism and misogyny of the contemporary trans activist movement. You mentioned the Vancouver Rape Relief Center, and that that is evidence of misogyny behind all of this, and it being much larger than just individuals and their preferences and personal stories.
Can I add hierarchy to that, because that's what we've missed? There is a hierarchy to this. Vancouver Rape Relief is women, and it's men who are shutting it down. Does that fit with yours?
Yes, it is. Yes, let's talk about the underlying misogyny to the contemporary trans activist movement. If you can talk about that, please.
So the first, where I go with that immediately is actually like the treatment of trans men within the community.
Mm-hmm.
So great, yeah. So I don't know. My experience was that it sucked to be a trans guy because your sexuality was being patrolled. It was super problematic if you only wanted to be with female people. People made fun of trans guys dating trans guys literally all the time. And also you were like patrolled for like these secret male privilege, like if you talked too much, that was a big one. Like this idea that trans guys are always talking. And like and so I don't know, that was a trip. It's a trip to be accused of having male privilege when you still have tits and you're walking down the street with them. So I worry about it a lot. And I'm laughing, but like some of the trans guys we're talking about are like 15-year-olds and 18-year-olds. Yeah. And it's so easy to prey on an 18-year-old and guilt trip them about their sexuality and stuff. So that's immediately where I go, and I don't know if that answers what you're talking about.
I got sort of initially schooled in modern trans activism when I criticized the cover of Vogue that Caitlyn Jenner was on, as I was like, this is super sexist. This is not what makes somebody a woman, right? I'm a woman, and to see this depiction, everybody's saying, yeah, sure, that's a woman. I was like, well, no. And then everybody jumped down my throat and said, you're a transphobe, you're a transphobe. And I was like, what a great cover for good old-fashioned sexism, you know? Like, they're making sexism look woke. And, yeah, it's intense. I mean, we've, in many ways, regressed. And the ideals of feminism that I grew up with, which basically said women can be anything, you can have any sort of personality, you can wear any kind of clothes. That's like, no, girls now, if they have the kind of personality like mine, people would say, oh, you're really a boy. And I forgot what else I was gonna say. But yeah, it smells like misogyny to me.
When you prioritize the feelings of a male person over the experience or life of a female person, I think that that's fair to describe that as misogyny, or at least one form of it. I believe that we've come to the point where the word transphobia is used to enforce that dynamic of prioritizing one group's feelings over the reality of another group's. And I don't think that's purely inside of the trans community. I think it's also from the people who declare themselves to be allies.
Yes.
I have a question that for the panel from an experience I had probably 10 years ago as a university librarian, not here, but at a prestigious university in the East Coast, where the board of directors was trying to figure out what to do with what they're called their frosh. I mean, there were, we couldn't, it was an important university for pronouns. I had to learn them. And the problem was that at this university, people can live with anybody, but not their frosh year. In other words, sophomore, junior, senior, you can choose, man, woman, whatever. But there were two shrinks on the board who disagreed. What do you do about, I hate to pick on Nebraska, but I will, a frosh from Nebraska being roomed with a person undergoing transition? And there was a big argument at this university about what to do. And I wonder what y'all think about that, because there was a lot of argument about, well, people undergoing transition, there's a lot of psychological stuff going on, and a poor frosh from Nebraska who is doesn't know about these issues shouldn't be put in this position. Is that still going on, or is it not? Is this an old-fashioned thing?
I have a question. Are you saying that the frosh were segregated in housing by sex?
They were by sex, yes.
And so the issue for the transitioning student was, I mean, the way this is phrased, it's like there seems to be two issues there. Like, I definitely have opinions about sex-segregated spaces, that the criteria of sex now is how people identify.
What happened is that Frosh, a good question, I didn't say this.
Yeah.
They were putting transitioning people in single rooms. And the transitioning people said, this isn't fair, we want a roommate. What? We want to have the Frosh experience.
And they wait.
And this university was putting a
And they wanted a roommate that was of the opposite sex.
Yes.
Because
they wanted a roommate that matched their identity rather than their sex,
yes,
right?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, all I am asking for is for people to acknowledge the difference between identity and reality, ideas and reality. Sex, like it or not, it's based in material reality. And yes, we all know intersex exists. That does not mean that sex is a spectrum. It just means that, biology is complicated and things happen, but there's no like third sex. There's no, there's no like, gamete that's between a sperm and an ovum, right? It's just look at sex. Like if we're making laws, those have to be based in material reality. And one area that I completely agree with the trans activists, where they say like, you don't know, what's inside another person's head and heart. It's like, that's correct. Nobody knows what's inside another person's head and heart, right? Like that's yours, you own that, right? But we can, in some cases imperfectly, observe material reality. And laws should be based on that, not things that we can't see, not things that nobody knows exists except you. It's, again, the separation of church and state. These assertions of identity, these are unprovable things. And that's not, it's like just because something's unprovable doesn't mean it's bad or wrong, or I don't respect it, or I don't like it, or I hate it. It just means it's unprovable. And religion is fine. People need it, actually. People need magic and spirituality and all that sort of stuff. But that's, that's not the realm of law.
So one solution they could have done, and again, maybe they've changed this. I haven't kept track. But this occupied a whole year of board meetings. Which I attended. So what they could do is a survey about how do you identify, and then if you say transitioning, put two transitioning people together if they want a roommate.
But the trans activists that I have dealt with has said that's not acceptable. Okay. You can't separate us. Separate but equal is not legal. Like they start comparing themselves to civil rights and different drinking fountains and things like that, and it's not. Biological reality should be the deciding factor.
So how do you do that if you're with kids coming to college the first
What
year?
is your sex?
Okay.
It's so simple.
What is your biological?
Yes.
Okay.
In the back with the blue hair. Yes. There's only two of you.
I think the problem is how our gender became. And I don't want to make myself fit somewhere else. I want to make myself help men be nice.
Yeah.
Good, work on that.
And I'm curious if the panel has anything to say about that.
Well, really quick, I'll just say that having had an experience of being in a very utopian-minded ideological community that turned coercive has given me a really rigid practicality. So I honestly consciously train my brain to not think about utopian stuff. So I don't know how the world should be, I don't know how men should be, I don't know how women should be, but here I am, and here are the people around me, and how are they behaving, and are they giving people honor and respect? Now that is because I know that I can go overboard and get way too deep into stuff. So that's just kind of where I'm at. And I know those questions are very interesting. I guess I think that the specifics of interactions and stuff, and the specifics of what medications do, the specifics of how people build lives, I think are very interesting. And so I like to think on a smaller scale these days.
Yeah, I'm also susceptible, or have been susceptible, to utopianism, and try not to go down that way. But I am an anarchist. The thing about anarchy is that the people that are actually practicing anarchy are not anarchists. They do not identify as anarchists. Like, you'll find like a lot of conservative Christians practicing anarchy, mutual aid, and people just, you know, willingly helping each other out or patching holes in the road or things like that, or being in recovery groups and just helping each other out. So I really think the most, this is like totally try it, you know, really the most, if not revolutionary, I'm not really interested in revolution at this point. It kills a lot of people. But, you know, the most, the best thing people can do for the world is to be decent human beings and help their neighbor. And the best way to fight fascism is to not behave like a fascist.
Yeah, I like it. I like that.
I said what I wanted.
Oh, can we get Millie in the back?
Yes. Over here.
Karina have something to say?
Oh.
No. In the back. Red shirt.
One concern I have is that attention span is finite. Not ours, but ours. Which I mean,
She wants us to leave?
it is nearly impossible to follow the academical backdrop of this discussion for a normal human. And what is happening in the rest of the country and in the rest of the world is the rising of a far more dangerous darkness than the one hill that we are trying to die on because of one division. And to me, it appears that the two apparent sides of this debate are actually natural allies against the far greater danger. And so it pains me to see friends on both sides with justifiable perspectives that fray one another with great conviction. So what are practical steps where we can say we do not need to pick whether we protect vulnerable women who have concerns about spaces that they need to find shelter in because they have been abused, and people that look like me have been the cause of it. Yet also, people that identify something other than they are born, why should they not be protected for what they choose? To me, this is a false dichotomy. We don't need to choose one or the other. They are, as somebody over there said, these are orthogonal needs. We need to insist on both, and we need to not compromise.
Right, we need to not conflate them in the same laws. It's like very understood. The problem is that they've been conflated in the same laws, and we need to not do that. That's it. Very simple.
And I would really like to disagree with you very politely. People that identify as women, that are men, that have are being placed in women's prisons. They are raping women in prison because they identify as women. Women's shelters are being shut down because they do not allow these men who identify as women to use these shelters. Women are getting hurt on sports field because they're playing against men who identify as women. There's a lot of actual physical things that are happening to women's bodies because of this. And I don't know if denying biological reality is a civil right.
So just to kind of respond to that, I worry all the time about whether I'm helping Trump get reelected. There is a way that by us, making this issue really prominent, we're absolutely helping people in Nebraska be like, what the hell is up with Democrats? And the problem is that when this viewpoint has the ACLU is really promoting this viewpoint in a way Planned Parenthood is. So in a perfect world, the left could have this discussion and work it out without everyone seeing. But
not happening.
I'm going to be real. I think that Trump's going to get reelected. Yeah. And I think it's going to be because of cultural stuff like this. Because it is insane what we're letting happen to kids. Yeah. We're wrong on that.
But one more question. This is going to be the last question.
Okay. Last question.
Continue on with, and talk about the Equality Act, because
Yes.
I'm leaving the Democratic Party over this. I'm not gonna be a Republican, but I'm changing my registration to independent over the Equality Act.
Wow.
Thank you. Yes, the Equality Act. Which,
let's talk about that. People should talk
yeah,
about that.
so I think it should be called the Female Erasure Act.
Yes.
Yeah, this is on a national level. What's happened to Title IX in the state of Illinois? This is going to conflate gender identity with sex, or really erase sex in favor of gender identity, or redefine sex as gender identity nationally. And this is going to totally undermine women's rights everywhere.
And every Democrat's on board with it.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Well,
not.
I mean, maybe there's a few that.
Yeah.
Can I say something quickly? That the Equality Act also wants to protect the rights of lesbians and gay people, and that maybe the wording about gender identity could be changed in the Equality Act, and it could be fixed so that it could be protecting
The bill they're sending through the House right now, though, it is not fixed.
I know, but
and I'm speaking as a lesbian feminist here. I don't want it passed in the form that it is.
right, in the form that it is, but I mean, what I know a lot of leftist feminists, and what they're concerned about is that if we get on board with saying we don't want the Equality Act at all, it's going to erase the protections that are intended in the Equality Act for gay and lesbian people.
Postponed. It's more important to protect women's rights at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. I'm a lesbian, yes, but I'm also a woman.
And women are always at the bottom of the heap.
But don't bills get tweaked? Aren't they supposed to be discussed and tweaked?
They get tweaked the wrong way.
So are we going to have some closing remarks from the panelists?
Nah.
No.
Gender identity is
We're not, we're just
Oh, I'm going to say thank you.
Okay.
separated.
All right, so we're going to close soon. I am so freaking grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the library. I'm so grateful